acted very, very dangerous.
Get these spidey sense, I was like, oh, something's off.
And I'm just like, man, I'm waiting to hear something,
Keep that crowd warmed up. Is Mr. Yahola Tiger.
What's going on, guys, and welcome to another edition of the War Cry Podcast. I'm your host, Yahola Tiger, and on this edition of the podcast, we are going to be talking about the Cabazon Reservation and the mysterious comings and goings of this tribe. And I had heard of these guys probably a couple months ago, and if you guys haven't seen the documentary on Netflix called American Conspiracy, The Octopus Murders, it's very, very, very interesting because there is a scene that I haven't talked about this on the podcast yet, but eventually I want to get to JFK, and there's a scene in there that I'm not going to ruin it for y'all, but kind of throws out another theory of what happened to him and who did it. I know people talk about the two shooters. I don't know, but definitely a very interesting documentary. But there's a section of that I had never heard of, and maybe if you're someone who frequents out west, and in Deo, California is where roundabout where this reservation is. They are not a very big tribe. The Cabazon natives out there, they only have they had back in the 80s 26 people in their tribe. Now you think about that, it's like, dang, that's kind of crazy. They got like barely anybody. But one thing that's very, very interesting to me about that is the fact that the people that come into play, and who, and really, what entity, government, I guess I could say, come in and try to basically bend the rules a little bit, which that happens. But I'm excited for this one. If you guys haven't, go get you something on the merch store. I appreciate those who have bought T-shirts, stickers. It's kind of crazy. I never thought the stickers would be popping, but the stickers are kind of popping, and I appreciate those of you who get things from the merch store. But hit that link below in the bio and get yourself something nice. All very cool quality. I have I think I have almost every design of the shirts in my closet. And eventually, when I get the camera situation set up for live streams, y'all will see those. But get yourself something nice. If you want me to post a picture of the T-shirts, you know how those guys. This is kind of crazy, but those guys that have flat billed hats or tennis shoes, and they have them all on the bed. I will do that for y'all for these T-shirts. I'll go that way. But like I said, guys, continue to support the podcast. I appreciate, I do appreciate it that you continue to support the podcast. I missed 16 words right there. But let's get on with the show. A man by the name of Fred Alvarez was found shot execution style with two of his friends in his home near Indio, California, on the Cabazon Reservation. Fred Alvarez was a very vocal Cabazon tribal leader, and he was feared, and he feared that he was a marked man. Days before his murder, his motorcycle was tampered with, and his mailbox was shot, and his house was ransacked. Alvarez visited the local newspaper several times to say that he had uncovered something big enough to get him killed. He arranged to talk with a lawyer to divulge what he knew, but he never made the meeting. It is said that he had hidden information about what he knew, and that it may have been uncovered, or that it may have been recovered by the killers. On the day of his murder, tribal member Joe Benitez swung by Alvarez's house And at the house, he found a bloated body of Alvarez and his two friends, Patricia Castro and Ralph Bogger. They were all shot, execution style. And they had been sitting in a semicircle, and the police has estimated that they were dead for 2 days. And so with that information, it comes to question. You hear that information. And it's on this reservation. And the police say, well, they've been dead for a while now. But why is the question, is the question that I would ask. Fred Alvarez, like I said, I mentioned he was a very vocal leader, and there was a lot of things going on in his tribe that he did not agree with, and that he did have beef with people over. Now, to give some background on the Cabazon reservation and that Cabazon tribe, it's a very small tribe with just 25 members at the time of the murders. This tribe was struggling very bad. It was having a lot of economical problems. They were, struggling as a tribe, and they were looking to drum up some financial support by agricultural means and also casino and possibly gambling. And they reached out, through various organizations, and they got a hold of a man named John Philip Nichols. John Philip Nichols, he passed away in 2001, but he's a very, almost I'd say, shady character. And that's like putting it lightly, honestly. He had so many comings and goings and dealings and backroom deals with different organizations and governments. But the one thing that I think that kind of escapes when I was looking at his Wikipedia, now I think it's been updated. But for a while there, I think it was not even mentioned, but he was a CIA agent, a member of the CIA. And in the 1950s and the 1960s, he made a name for himself in there, dealing with government interest, I guess you could say, for different countries. Nichols was described as an I'm gonna butcher this, an economist, resource developer, international social worker with a special interest in Native American and indigenous Indians. And this was said by former Senator Mr. John, and I'm going to butcher this name, Aberzek. Nichols was also known as a shady operative who was involved in various activities, including weapons demonstrations for groups of nefarious figures. And so this is where, his background comes into play, because in 1978, they called him Dr. John, is how they referred to him. The tribe referred to him. But he was appointed as financial advisor for the tribe, for the Cabazons. And after years of being, hired by some unidentified groups or organizations, driving him to the work towards his expansion, he eventually launched multiple different ventures on the reserve. And this is kind of crazy, So he put in basically a tobacco shop, and then that tobacco shop eventually became a casino. And according to the documentary, and I mentioned that before in the opening, they talk about how he knew the different laws and regulations when it come to federal land, and especially Native American reservations, or American Indian reservations is what this called back then. And he knew how to work the system in order to get basically bypassed by local law enforcement. And, he knew how to maneuver through different means of that nature. And one thing that he would do, when he would come to these reservations or he'd come to this protected land, is he would become some sort of financial advisor. And in the documentary, his son talks about how they were spending time in South America, and I think I want to say he lived in Buenos Aires, and I can't remember what country that is. I think that's Brazil. Man, y'all gonna kill me with my geography, but in my capitals, but I ain't from there, so I don't know. No, I think it is Brazil, Buenos Aires, Brazil, or Argentina, no, or Chile. I don't know. Anyways, but I believe that they said Buenos Aires or Ares or however you say it, but. He always thought it was weird that his dad would be, he'd take off and he'd, say, oh, son, I'm going over here, I'm going over there, and essentially would topple governments. Like, so he would go there, leave, and then the government would, either topple or there would be significant changes. And he always thought that was strange at his dad, and he never could really figure out what his dad actually did. But his dad always called himself a social worker. And when he became advisor, and like I said, I mentioned, they brought all these different, ventures to this Cabazon tribe. One thing too that I think that it was mentioned, or I haven't mentioned yet, but so at the time of Fred, so I mentioned earlier that he was very vocal about some of the things that was going on. Well, Fred had been kind of looking into the money, and the money wasn't adding up, and he had broken into, I believe, one of the casino safe rooms, and he found documents that, this is alleged. We never knew what happened with this information. This information disappeared when they found his body, because he said that he told the lawyer that he had it on him, and Fred went through that office and found documents that he thought were like, oh, okay, this is serious. He's stealing from the tribe, and he's using this money to create ventures with these entities, these outside entities. And one thing about Nichols is that he was, like I said, he was a smooth operator. And so when Fred went to the reporter, and the reporter, in the documentary, and also in multiple newspapers in California, I think the San Diego Times mentioned him. But, Fred was like, I want to talk to a lawyer before I talk to you, before we bust this open. And the lawyer's like, well, do you have the documents? I'd like to at least see them. And Fred's like, well, I have them in a safe place. And so then Fred tries to meet up with a lawyer, and he never makes it, because obviously, he was found dead. But to keep going on Nichols and kind of his timeline, in 1985, he was found, or he pled no contest, basically, to 2 felony conspiracies to murder. So basically, he pleaded no contest, which means he's guilty, and he basically tried to hire 2 individuals to kill people, basically assassinate people. And he also, but he kind of tried to say, oh well, these people were damaging the community. These people were drug dealers. They were harming the community, so I had to take them out, like vigilante justice. But the killings were never carried out, and he spent 2 years in prison, and then, like I mentioned before, he died in 2001. And so a lot of the times, it wouldn't really be Phillips that would be handling his business. It was people by the name, there was a guy by the name of Jimmy Hughes, who was a former head of tribal security. And Fred Alvarez worked with him as the tribal head of that. And that's when Fred kind of found out, hey, there's some stuff going on. He said, we got to figure this out. And Fred's, I think it was Fred's sister or his wife, it was someone related to Fred, had come out, I think her name was Linda Alvarez, had come out and said that basically that she believes that Fred had the information and that he was killed because of it. And there's multiple different theories, that she had brought forward and that had been found, is one of the theories was the murders, is that Alvarez discovered money skimming by outside informations or outsiders from the tribe, and that the casino was basically a hub for trafficking, drug trafficking, and weapons munition trafficking. Another theory is that Alvarez had stumbled upon plans of a top secret weapons deal, and some relatives of the victims wondered whether Alvarez may have also discovered a secret partnership between Cabazon tribe and a private security firm by the name of Wackenhut Corporation. Witnesses and court documents describe the deal as everything from providing security services to a building, munitions arsenal, to selling weapons to the Nicaraguan Contra, which is a U.S.-backed rebel group. But the tribal history, it has different perspectives, I guess you could say. And so that was one thing that was kind of crazy about this whole thing when it comes to Wackenhut. So with the octopus murders, there's so many different rabbit holes. And one of the rabbit holes where it starts is there was a man by the name of Earl Bryant, who was a cabinet member of Reagan, which brings in the Reagan administration into this, that they possibly had some knowledge. And, basically they were documented, and multiple witnesses had seen Earl Bryant involved in the weapons demonstrations and deals, and the manufacturing of these high-powered weapons within the Cabazon reservation. And like I said, he was a cabinet member for Reagan. And so that's one thing that's kind of crazy to me, is that this man, Dr. John Phillips, had pulled in all of these resources and all these people to try to basically make a living off this reservation. And Fred Alvarez is trying to allegedly. This is all alleged, except for the no contest to the two assassination hits that Phillips was involved in. But one thing that's kind of crazy about all this is you look up Whack and Hunt and who's involved with that, and they have a lot of federal contracts when it comes to the to different, dare I say, munitions facilitation. I know that's kind of I'm using like words that I really don't like using. They're kind of hard, I guess you could say. But like the filtering out of weapons and munitions, and that's one thing that's kind of crazy about this whole thing is that like he somehow figured out a way to gain the system to bring in these corporations and to do weapons demonstrations on this res, and leading to the murders of 3 tribal members during this time. And I think that that's one thing that I always harp about when it comes to when tribes allow outsiders or to give money to outsiders to try to, and I hate to say outsiders because that's not really what I'll just say non-tribal members, but to further some type of agenda. And I mentioned that on the last one about Cherokee Nation, like the donations to all these various organizations that I'm like, okay, well, that money could go somewhere else. But to kind of wrap this all up, a man by the name of Jimmy Hughes was arrested and charged in 2009 for the triple murder of these tribal members. But then they were later dropped in 2010 due to lack of evidence. And to this day, to my knowledge, and I've tried to do research and try to find if they ever found anybody, or they tried to get somebody for this crime, it still remains unsolved. And like I said, as I mentioned, in 2000 this year, American Conspiracy Octopus Murders was released, and it goes into a lot of depth. There was a man by the name of John Booth Nichols who was not related to Dr. Philip Nichols, but he was the one that was kind of the most dangerous man, is how they framed him. And there was a guy named Michael Reconasciuto who kind of broke this open and kind of put the link out there, and he's the one that tipped off the journalist on how to find this this crime, and then ties it into that octopus murder. And like I said, over the years, there have been multiple witnesses that have come out, and like I said, I mentioned Michael Reconasciuto. He was a CIA, and I guess background on him is he's a CIA guy, and he was a child prodigy. His dad was involved in the CIA, multiple government agencies, and he had come out and said basically there was a lot of backdoor deals involving Philip Nichols, and he currently is in jail right now because I guess he fears for his life, and so he'd rather be in maximum security prison than out free because of the things that he has said. And part of me, I believe some of it, I believe kind of not of it, but if you watch the documentary, he's kind of an unreliable narrator when it comes to some of these stories. Like, he kind of jumps around, he talks in circles, and I didn't really believe a lot of the stuff. It's kind of interesting. The phrase "believe nothing that you hear and half of what you see, and everything isn't what it always seems" is something I would preface when you watch this documentary. But it's kind of a crazy at the end of the day, and to tie this all together when it comes to this, these crimes and the injustices of this tribe, done by Philip Nichols. He actually helped basically the Supreme Court basically allow, during that time. Now, Philip Nichols was going through his trial, and what's crazy is that he actually helped the Cabazon and I think another tribe, I can't remember exactly, but to establish gaming rights for tribes. And the Supreme Court overturned that in favor of reservation natives and things like that. So he has kind of a weird history. This tribe is the one that allows, Cherokee Nation and Muskogee Nation to do gaming on a federal level. And so one thing that about this whole conspiracy / true crime murders is that I feel like there's always two sides to a coin on some of this stuff. I hate that, Fred Alvarez, saw something, and we may never know what it is. I know, like, this documentary that I'm talking about in this episode talks about a lot of it and kind of the dealings. but we will never know what he found, and I hate that, and I hate that for his family, because I know his family's still asking for justice in this, especially him trying to do right by the tribe. It's just a sad state of affairs. But this is the episode, guys. I appreciate that you guys continue to support the podcast. Please go follow me on Instagram and TikTok, Warcry Pod, Yahola Tiger on Facebook. Add me on Facebook, and then message me if you because sometimes I'll let message requests kind of sit there, and I'm like, I don't know this person. But go ahead and like I said, if you add me on Facebook, make sure you send me a message. Let me know you listen to the podcast. Continue to buy from the merch store. It helps the podcast out. And like I said, guys, I appreciate everyone, and I'll catch you on the next one.